Hey, Trekkers and Trekkies. It's been a minute since I've done one of these unhinged sort of talks with everyone, but some recent conversations have gotten me to thinking a lot. So I wanted to bring something up that, in a way, I'm not just talking to the Star Trek community, I am actually talking to people who I consider friends. And I hope they understand I'm not trying to I'm not trying to target you. I'm not trying to be mean. But this is a serious enough idea that I think it's right to start talking about it. Because the only reason that I'm on in the position I'm in is because I had a friend about 15 or so years ago set me down and had a very similar conversation. You see, a lot of people complain about Star Trek Discovery, and there's certain complaints that I'm fine with, hearing out. Yes, the show, especially in the first season, had some writing issues. Season 4 got drug out way too much. It was a season that probably should have been about 3 or 4 episodes long, and they turned it into a story that lasted for 10. And it just made it to where it was uninteresting by the time we got to the end of it. There are valid complaints to be had about the show. That being said, for a couple of years now, everybody has been, well, not everybody, a lot of people have been throwing a real hard fit about people crying on the show. Oh, they cry all the time. The reason they don't have carpets is because the carpets would be wet. So here's the thing. Back mid 20s, a friend of mine set me down and talked to me. He was a friend who's a few years older than me, and got me to actually realize that one of my bad habits was my attempt to approach everything so logically, to put the best Star Trek term on it, since that's what we're talking about. And the fact that I never, not literally never, but so rarely would consider other people's actual feelings, that I would treat the fact that another person might feel differently or think differently with a sort of disregard. And it made me realize that, yeah, I mean, I've got feelings about stuff. I've had people say things to me that made me, especially when I was a kid and a teenager. I was a sensitive kid, and I've always been a little overweight. And it was funny as a kid. Having kids tease me about my weight never bugged me. It was when full-grown adults did it that it actually really, because, like, you're 40 years old. You should not be, calling a 10-year-old a tubby or whatever. I'm not even going to get into it. That's different subject. And I was doing really good in my 20s. I lost a lot of weight. But of course, other things have happened since then, and we'll get to that in a minute. I really thought about going through Star Trek and just making a list of Next Gen and Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise, of all the times that people on the show actually cried. Because I'm sorry, people have. Even our beloved Captain Picard. I mean, come on, one of the best emotional moments for Captain Picard was in the follow up to the Best of Both Worlds when he went to visit his brother, and he finally breaks down, gets super emotional about how terrified he was being used as a puppet for the Borg. Beautiful moment. Have heard people who have been in an incredibly narcissistic relationship or in a relationship with a very narcissistic person that they actually kind of connect with that. The idea of somebody using and abusing them on that level. Of course, then there's a few years later when Captain Picard's brother died, and man, I remember back when Generations came out, people were bitching about the fact that Captain Picard was so sad about his brother and nephew. And I mean, I was 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that area. I don't quite remember now. And I thought that was weird. I was like, that was a really impactful moment for the story. And it connected to the way that the villain was then trying to manipulate Captain Picard. And so I didn't understand why people were so upset about the fact that the captain got emotional over the loss of his brother. I mean, come on. You guys can literally go on my channel, go back a few months and see how emotional I was over the loss of my brother-in-law. I still am. I'm not going to go into that. But there's tons of examples all throughout Star Trek. Heck, one of my everybody hates Star Trek 5, and it's got problems. But one of the best moments of the whole movie is the scene where Sybok is trying to emotionally manipulate Kirk and McCoy and Spock, and he shows McCoy when his father was dying, and McCoy starts crying, because of course it's him having to relive the death of his father under horribly traumatic circumstances that he has a really bad retrospect on. I get that. I mean, that would upset me as well. But I want to come to two of the most impactful times when somebody in Star Trek outside of Discovery cried. Now, obviously, one of them's pretty obvious. I've got it on the monitor behind me. And it's because that scene in Far Beyond the Stars, it is a really hard scene to watch, because Avery Brooks gives it everything. And I remember seeing an interview with Terry Farrell where she talked about the fact that when they were filming that scene, that Avery went hard, and they weren't expecting him to fall to the floor crying the way that he did at the end of the scene. And in fact, Avery was the director of the episode, but of course, whenever he was on stage, on screen, the assistant director behind the camera was the one who was supposed to call cut, and action and that kind of thing on the scenes. And apparently even he kind of got flummoxed for a moment and let things run a little bit too long before he finally called cut. And this actually kind of freaked out all the actors, because he got so emotional. And the thing is that in that moment, as the character, and I get, looking back on it, I understand, both because of things I've heard Avery talk about in interviews, but also because of stuff I've experienced. And it's one of those things, if you've never had someone literally speak to you like you are less than human, you might not actually understand what's happening right there. Because the most important thing he says a lot of really good stuff in that moment, but he says, "I am a human, god damn it." And if you've never had somebody dehumanize you, really dehumanize who you are, it's hard to emotionally connect with a scene like that. And when I don't remember how old I was when that episode came out, 15, 16, something like that. I thought it was a really emotional scene, but I didn't connect with it. Well, because of things that have happened in my life in the last 20, 30 years since that episode came out, I get it now. I have had somebody treat me like that. And it's hard. It makes you want to cry and scream out just like he does. But for me, there's one episode of Deep Space Nine I've not been able to watch in over 3 years. Um, I'm trying to. I'm trying to get back to it. It's the episode "The Siege of AR 558." Aaron Eisenberg. He's talked about this in interviews back before, when he was alive, about the people who would come and talk to him about that episode. Because, and this is the thing, 4 years ago, I thought it was a good episode. I thought it was, it always made me feel something. But since then, I've realized, until you've experienced really, really fucking bad physical trauma, and this is the thing about that episode, I've not watched it in over 3 years. I can hear Nog screaming when I think about that scene. God damn it, I wasn't gonna do this. And this is what I'm talking about. And y'all are, some of you might give me shit in the comments. I don't care. Because this is what we're gonna get to about Discovery. It's hard. It's hard to think about experiencing true physical trauma, even though it's been nearly 3 years now. In fact, I think when I post this, I'm going to be just a couple of weeks away from exactly 3 years. But this is the thing that my friend back many years ago was trying to tell me, is that if you've not experienced something that can hurt, not just physically, emotionally, mentally, and that's the thing about that scene with Dr. McCoy and Cybok, is that was deep psychological manipulation. And until you've had somebody actually try to do that to you, it's hard to understand. But getting to Star Trek Discovery, don't mock these characters for having emotions that you can't deal with. Because that's honestly that's what my friend told me. And I realized looking back that whenever I made fun of others for having an emotional reaction to something, it wasn't that their emotional reaction was wrong. It was that I didn't have the maturity, the experience, and the compassion to understand their emotions. And I still have areas where I have to grow with that. There are things that I haven't experienced. I've experienced a lot. I've come a long way in 20 years as far as things I've experienced. And it makes it where I can connect with a lot of people. Because And that's been my whole thing for years is I wanted to get out and I wanted to experience the best of things, the worst of things, all of it. I've had some amazing highs and I don't want to experience anything lower than what I have experienced at this point because it hurts. Man, it hurts. And if you've never experienced that kind of, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, not even the most horrible person. So, to get to my point, whenever people in the Star Trek community start complaining about the emotions and the crying on Star Trek Discovery, what I'm hearing and what my friend from nearly 20 years ago would say is you're not emotionally prepared to deal with what another person has experienced. And this is the thing that, despite all the problems with season one of Star Trek Discovery, the subplot that they did with Michael Burnham's character was actually fantastic. And the reason I say that is because when we first meet Burnham, she had been living with Sarek, the universe's most narcissistic Vulcan. Sorry, that's another video. And she had suppressed her emotions. And it was the suppression of her emotions that caused her to do that horribly cold, calculated risk decision to, oh God, the word has just left my brain. When you go against the captain, it's called a mutiny. There it is. It was actually the motionless decision to turn against Giorgio that caused all of her problems. It was her actually experiencing things outside of her Vulcan childhood, because it's basically from the age of, what was she, like 8, 9, 10, when she went to live with Sarek, somewhere in that area. So in other words, at minimum 10 years, probably more like 12 to 15 years of being raised by the universe's most asshole Vulcan father, to now experiencing the actual drama and pain and joy that the universe has to bring her. I mean, come on. When we see her falling for, oh God, I've gone blank on his name. The dude who was disguised, he was a Vulcan, or not a Klingon. I'm not even going to bother. You know what I'm talking about. That was the first time she'd ever truly experienced the feelings of love, probably even things like lust and sexual feelings at all. We don't know that, but it sounded like it was her first time ever having an emotional, physical relationship with another person. God, I'm going blank on his name. That's actually bothering me a little bit. But throughout season one, she goes through all this stuff that helps her to become a more emotional, better person who wouldn't mutiny against their captain, unless they found out that their captain was an evil mirror universe. Anyways, So that's really, I guess, I think that's, I'm bad at closing out. I don't have notes. I promise. If I turn the camera around, you're just gonna see my messy ass studio. Um, I get ideas and I just sit down and I rant and I cry and I act stupid on the internet. But it's been nearly 20 minutes of this at this point. Think about, think about it. Go out and make something. Go out and experience something. And I'll see you next time. If you enjoy my videos and want to see more, please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell icon. If you want to support me, you can find me on Patreon or go over to Zazzle for prints of my artwork, t-shirts, and other cool stuff. If you're still here, why? Do you want to jam out?